Hi everyone, my name is Tammy Scully. I am a resident here in Midland. I am locally a mental health therapist and also volunteer at Cultivate Coffee and Tea, where we also do levels of counseling and case management. But here today, I'm planning to talk to you and share with you an adventure that I went on when I joined Peace Corp and how Peace Corps led to the mission field. And that was an unexpected turn. So today I just hope for you guys as you watch that if nothing else, you have a moment to just go on an adventure with me right from the comfort of your own couch or recliner and just enjoy the story. But also for those of you who have thought about traveling and trying something new and taking a little risk, maybe this will help encourage you to maybe lean into that dream that you've had or start to consider it or look into it more. So if you could just join me, we're going to go through this story of when Peace Corps went to the mission field. So first, when I signed up for Peace Corps, I didn't know what country to choose, and they had a drop-down menu of 3 options, 2 of which required language that I didn't have, and 1 that did not require a language. And so essentially, Eswatini, Africa chose me. So this map shows where Eswatini, Africa is located. It's in the lower southeast corner. It's a dot on the map, as you can see. Very small. Most people have not heard of it. And that is where I ended up going in 2017 to 2019. The next map next to it is Eswatini enlarged. So you can see it's built of 4 regions. I was placed in the Manzini region for the 2 years with a host family. So I lived on a homestead with a mother, a father, and 3 little brothers. I was actually older than my host mother, so that was kind of fun. So this kind of shows exactly where I was for that 2 years. We did many projects there. Most people ask, well, what do you do in Peace Corps? It's really hard to explain. First, because every country handles it a little differently. Here in Eswatini at the time, they handled it where you were given a title. Mine was Youth Development Agent, which was really a large umbrella of a title, because underneath that could be any project that's associated with youth. And youth in Eswatini is all the way up to the age of 35. So essentially you're dealing with a large population of people and possibilities in that area. So what they do is Peace Corps trains you up for 10 weeks. You don't go to that community for that first 10 weeks. And you learn a bunch of ideas on what you could do in your community. But none of them are guaranteed because you don't know what your community needs yet. So then once training finishes, they take you, all your belongings, in a bunch of buckets. Hopefully I'll get time to share about that later. But they take you to that village, they drop you off, and they wave goodbye. And it was in that moment that I thought, what am I doing? How did I get myself into this? It was a very overwhelming moment in a way because it was so new, so unfamiliar. There were so many uncertainties. There was no plan spelt out for you on what you would do each day. It was a matter of you in a community and the hope that you would be able to make some kind of impact in that 2 years. So this first picture here you've been seeing is a preschool before. This was in my community. They had preschool Monday through Friday. I was able to meet the preschool teacher and visit, and this is what we saw, which wasn't too bad. I was actually, wow, you got wallpaper on the walls. This is nice. This is all right. But they did have dreams of making it more preschool friendly. So as we talked, we decided that maybe we could raise money to get a mural painted, but it would be an educational mural for the kids. So we raised the money on GoFundMe. So it was a lot of the help from people here back home that were able to raise the money to hire this company, Yebo Outreach, that comes out and they paint a mural. They also include community members to paint alongside them. So it includes the community as well, so they can learn new skills and be a part of it. So here's a picture of that, of them painting and some of the kids just, hanging out. And here was part of our finished project. So here's where we painted, the outside was painted with the alphabet and numbers. The inside was a kid city. And it was meant to encourage learning around different parts of life. So they could learn things based on, according to like a library, a museum, a shop, a church. They had a theater, so the chalkboard became the theater. And then we did red curtains on the side of it, which I don't have that picture up here. So it was a way for them to learn and kind of connect to life. and do kind of life skills learning using this type of mural. Another event we had was an HIV awareness event, and this had a lot of pieces to it. It was quite fun. One thing people did, the youth at the high school dressed up in their traditional lihia wrap, and they all wore their red lihia. And they marched down from the high school to this area where this youth building was. And this was the youth building before. And we had gotten our hands on some paint, and we decided, let's try to do our own mural. Now that we learned how to do it at the preschool, maybe we could kind of do something of our own that has an HIV awareness message. So I got with the youth group there and had them brainstorm ideas of what they'd want that to say or look like. And you can see on the ground there's a small red ribbon in a blue container. And that was the drawing that we came up with that we were going to now enlarge and put on the side of this building. So here is the efforts of a group of local community. We did not hire someone to do this time. Trying to do our first mural as a team. And it was coming together really nicely. I was very impressed with their work. All it took was chalk and paint, and it was really coming together. In addition to this, while they were painting, we had connected with organizations that teach about HIV education. We also had a testing unit come out, a mobile unit, so they would offer HIV testing on the spot. They also offered take-home test units for people who wanted to do it in private, because that is a thing too. There's a lot of stigma around it, so that was offering an opportunity for them to be tested in private. And this is our finished mural here. The folks who got tested that day were able to put their handprint on the mural. And we found out later you had to be 18 or older to be tested that day, so that's why there's a limited amount that day. But they were able to come back and add to it over time. So that was a way to encourage testing. And then there's the close-up of I've been tested. This is our little group of girls in their red lihia, the ones that marched from the high school. There were a bunch of boys, girls, a ton of them. So we had to do a pose, of course, just to enjoy the moment. But next we did a career fair. We actually did one each year. This all started by talking to a teacher and asking her, what is the issues here at the school? What are you noticing with the students? And her main response was, there's no motivation to learn. And so as we were brainstorming, I was reminded of learning about how Peace Corps volunteers before had done career fairs in their community. So with that said, I brought up the idea. She didn't know what that was. So we talked about what that would look like. And we went and invited all the local universities and colleges, some trade schools, the police academy, pretty much anyone we could invite to come all the way out 2.5 hours into the rural space to come share about their programs, share about the opportunities, give out their contact information, and just help the kids get excited, help them feel motivated, and have a reason why education is important. Most of the children there in the rural spaces don't understand why it's important because they already live on their homestead. They've been working with their family, tending to the cows and the chickens, and they're farming the harvest. So they see that as their future. So when you're trying to tell them they need to learn English, they need to learn these topics, they don't understand the point. So the career fair was sort of showing there is other opportunity out there if that is something you're interested in. So that was kind of a huge purpose in this whole career fair idea. And there's a picture of some of the children just walking to the different tents. We knew, by knowing the kids out there, we knew they wouldn't probably engage because, one, they're teenagers, and teenagers are the same across the globe. But also the information, it's just hard to know what they're looking for. So we gave them a challenge that we would have a raffle of door prizes, which came from these colleges and universities, and the kids had to go to at least 3 different tents, and they had to answer a certain select amount of questions, and then they would enter those answers into a drawing for a potential prize. And as you can see, it worked. They are gathered around those tents and gathering contact information and all kinds of other information. And this is just another example of them with one of the colleges there, the Amati University. And then another event we had towards the end of my 2 years, it came as a download at 7 o'clock in the morning. I am not a morning person, so that is miraculous on its own. I woke up at 7 a.m. still in bed and just saw she power in my head with all of the components and everything pulled together which was a conference for girls aged 14 to 24, where they would learn income-generating skills. And it would be a variety of skills. They would do 4 workshops over a 2-day event. It would be 2 each day. And then there were a lot of other things we did around those 2 workshops that were fun. But here, this picture shows some of the workshops they did. One was beading, sewing. There were healthy relationships, which we talked about their menstrual cycles. And here I'm wearing one of their bracelets. But this bracelet tracks their menstrual cycle. Each color means a different thing and can also help to empower girls with pregnancy. They can know when they're most likely to get pregnant. So if they don't want to be, they can discreetly just not participate. Because a lot of times they're in a patriarchal kingdom, also a polygamous country. There is very little say on the women's side. So this sort of empowers them discreetly just by being a bracelet. This was not my creation, by the way. This was a previous Peace Corps volunteer that was sharing this with all of us to share with others. But the girls love it. It's an easy craft. It's very educational and empowering in the end. And then we also had a talent show, a clothing swap, so they got to shop in the rural area. They had never heard of something like that. So they were able to bring a piece of clothing with no holes in it in exchange for another piece of clothing someone else brought. So you can imagine the excitement as they walked out of there with, to them, new clothing. And it was so simple. It didn't cost us anything. It didn't cost them anything except to give in order to receive, which is also a lesson we wanted to incorporate into She Power. So that's part of She Power. They earned She Power bucks along the way. So as they complete a workshop, they earn this fake She Power money. You can see a picture up in the right-hand corner. And at the end, they were able to use their She Power bucks to purchase more materials so they could continue these skills outside of the conference and have potential income opportunities. And this was the first She Power where we all came together with our new lihia. That is a traditional cloth wrap that is very common there. It is very rare to make your own, and we were able to raise enough funds to have our girls design a lihia. And then the winning group, there were multiple groups, the winning group that had the best design was then afforded an opportunity to go into town and to Yabo Art, who knows how to do screen printing, and they were able to be a part of the screen printing process. So this was a very exciting moment for these girls. Not only did they make this, which usually they don't make much in the rural area at all, and now they're wearing their own like personalized She Power lihia that nobody else has. So they were very excited. We could not pull them out of that workshop. That screen printing workshop, we could not get them to go home. I mean, it was, which is very rare there. Usually they're ready to go home, most teenagers. So this is a picture of that. And then lastly, while I was serving that 2 years, I had met a woman who ended up being the counterpart, which is kind of like my partner in work. And she was just on fire for anything out there. She is the She Power out there. And I'll show a picture of her later. She also was called to be a pastor after losing her husband to a brain tumor, and they had 2 children. So coming out of that very difficult season, at the same time the Lord's calling her into ministry, and she describes it as going kicking and screaming to start, because she just thought, what do you mean? I want to be the pastor's wife, not the pastor. And so I met her. She was hosting her church called Liberty in Christ International Church, and she was hosting it at the high school in a classroom. With big dreams, she had this piece of land that's behind me in this picture that she had dreams of building this church on. And later, after hearing her story, I went to town because I found a church in town that was more Western, so I was able to worship there. While there, they posted this program called the ICBC program, which means In Community by Community. And what it does is plant rural churches around Eswatini. So naturally, I ask a few questions because I'm now curious, although I don't know anything about doing this kind of thing. They connected me to the right people, and by March 2019, a few months before I left, she was accepted into this program. So this is the picture before we knew anything was going to happen, and it was really just a dream and living on faith. So this is, before I go further with that, to show you what's happening now, I wanted to go a little bit behind the scenes of this experience in Peace Corps. As you could see, all those pictures I just showed and all the projects that came about, it's like, wow, all those things happen, that's so great, and it is. But Peace Corps definitely challenges you internally more than anyone really talks about. I didn't even expect that. I just thought, let's go, make some change, and then come home in 2 years. Pretty simple. And you're excited for the adventure, and it is a very good adventure. I would recommend it to anybody. But there's also that part where you're internally having to be confronted with yourself. There's a lot of downtime, endless downtime. It looks like I was super busy by all the pictures, but there's months in between those projects where you couldn't get the community to move at all. So suddenly you're challenged to feel successful. You're challenged to feel productive. You don't even know what that means after a while. Like, am I doing anything here? Should I even still be here? Should I just go home? All these questions start to sort of plague almost your everyday. There's mornings I'd wake up in the beginning, probably the first 6 months maybe, and just wake up with that tickle of anxiety of like, what am I even doing today? I'd wake up with so much uncertainty. And so it was a very uncertain process until you end up doing projects. And so in that, naturally, as you're wrestling through your own stuff, and you're in a very isolated, quiet space, in my case, in Peace Corps, this is not speaking for every Peace Corps volunteer, but in my experience, the Lord started speaking to me very loudly. And I don't mean loudly in volume, I just mean persistently. And because it was so quiet and I had so little to do a lot of the time, I just kept hearing, even when I didn't want to. And in the process of that, he took me into my biggest surrender of my life. We surrender many things, like, okay, I'll give that up for a little while, give up some sugar, give up some, coffee, give up that really good burrito at Qdoba. So we know what surrender means, and sacrifice, and kind of giving those things up, and fasting, and these kind of ideas. But this was that one thing I was holding on to for myself that was for me. So I said, God, you can have all 90% of this, but this one's mine. And what that was is I was in a relationship with a woman stateside when I went to Peace Corps. Still was in that relationship when I went, with no plans on ending that relationship at all. I got there, and as he continued to talk to me, and I continued to hear more and more, which was somewhat new to me, I was eventually moved through a surrender my identity as a whole to him, and trust that he knows what he's going to do with that. And what happened with that is it also took my relationship away naturally. As much as we were trying to hold on to it, even during the surrender, it just eventually took that relationship as well. So this was a huge moment of me stepping into trusting my entire identity, and that's all the way from my coffee drinking all the way to my relationships and everything in between, and just trusting him with 100% of all of it. So this was very huge, a very emotional process. I think 1.5 years of the 2 years I was wrestling through this. It was not pretty. It was hard, but the Lord showed up in that church I was attending in town, and with the woman in community that I mentioned earlier, that's the She Power out there. She was able to come alongside me and catch those tears when they'd fall, and I'd be able to catch hers as well as she's going through hers. And then on the other side, at the church I was attending, they came alongside me with guided prayer, which I'd never experienced, where they just sit with you and help you hear what the Lord is saying in all of your broken places. So it took me through my entire life of those broken spaces, and was able to move me through each one and process out the emotion, and come to a place where I saw him rescue me from every single one of those times. And so I left that place very free, but also not knowing what's next. So it left me there. These pictures are just kind of showing a little bit of it. A Peace Corps volunteer drew that picture on the right with the rainbow coming off the hands, like I was surrendering it up. And it was just a beautiful piece of art that she drew. And she actually was part of the LGBTQ group, which was just such a beautiful, kind thing for her to do for me, knowing what I was going through. And then the Rainbow Faith Journey was just the notes that I wrote, because I was asked to speak at their Pride event. And this was kind of that's how I do my notes when I speak about something. I just draw a little chicken scratch, and I just follow those until I share the whole story. So that was what I used as my notepad. And then this was the center picture is when I was reading about Christ's letters, and it talks about how your story is written not with ink, but on the hearts of so many. And it just reminded me of my story, and that being the truth. It's a Christ letter. It's just a letter going out to share with others. So I was baptized. I was baptized as a child as well. But this was a moment of baptism by choice and by understanding fully why I was doing it. And I really knew I was surrendering all, and that's capital A-L-L. This was not taking a swim in a pool. This was a very huge moment, and that is the pastor's wife that I asked if she could baptize me, but she was the one that took me through the healing, the guided prayer session where I moved through so much healing in areas in my life, and I've received so much strange peace that I never knew I could have. I was a very anxious person before, and I have lost a lot of that anxiousness through that. And then this was a women's retreat there where we got to make signs, and the word rescued was just what was on my heart. And so I had an opportunity to make a sign, and I still have that today hanging up in my home. So now you're probably wondering, what's happened since Peace Corps? God was so good that he provided a way for me to go back to Eswatini just this past August for 6 weeks, which is an unusual amount of time, and I was so thankful. But I was able to go back. We did our second She Power conference. So this just happened at the end of August, so really just barely a month ago. And we were able to do the same Lihia. This is the new Lihia for 2022. So each year we plan to do the same conference and the same Lihia contest. So we hope to have a new color each time. The design changes. As you can see, this one, the first one had a lot more flowers and hearts as the design around the border. This one, you can tell there is an increase in creativity. They've really started to think about what does building a powerful mind, a powerful body, and a powerful future really mean. And they started to add images that fit those categories. So that is our 2022 Lihia. These are the girls at the workshop. This is a part where they're watching how to make a mini version of a Lihia. So they're learning how to pull the paint across the screen and all that. And they're very engaged. You cannot peel these girls away. Like, we even brought KFC for lunch, and that was hardly tempting. Like, they still wanted to finish what they were doing. And that just doesn't happen there. And here's another picture of kind of what that screen printing process looks like. And they do 2 squares at a time. Each Lihia is made up of 2 squares, so it's a long rectangular piece of fabric. And they printed about 4 at a time down that large table. And here are the girls at the end of the workshop holding up their new Lihia. These are the 4 designers that won. They were in a group, so they did this together. And then the girls on the right show kind of how the Lihia is typically worn. They're holding it. They usually tie it, but it's usually tied on the left shoulder if they are single or unmarried, and it's tied on the right shoulder if they're married. So that's just one of those little things you wouldn't think are significant, but it is. And then we've had the She Power Creatives Club that also has come out of this. Our goal wasn't just to have the conference and end it, and then they just wait a year, hopefully, to do it again. We wanted to have the conference be a kickoff of skills where then they have an opportunity to continue learning all year until the next one. And so we started the She Power Creatives Club. This was after, we started it right when I was about to leave in 2019. And the She Power woman I told you about, her name is Pendu Lile, by the way. She continued this all the way through in majority of even COVID. She had them sewing face masks. It just never stopped. She just kept this thing going, which was incredible. So these girls continued to learn. They would learn beading. They started with a ring, which takes maybe 45 minutes. And then through all this time, they started making bracelets, necklaces. I mean, it just grew and grew and grew. And we had a local support there in Eswatini, a South African family who stepped up to kind of give them a payday of sorts. So every month they would donate like 1,000 Rand, which is equal to maybe like $80 US, which is a lot though to them, and was able to say, hey, we'll buy whatever they make that month, and then you guys can just give them some kind of pay per item. And so they were getting paydays. This is an example of a payday where they can also use some of their pay to buy more materials if they'd like. So here's an exchange of a moment where they They wanted to use some of their money to get more materials so they could make more product and make more income. And that dream of a church plant that I mentioned, here is the church. It actually was planted, also including a pastor's home. So Pendu now, I call her Pendu for short, but Pendu Lile. She now has a pastor's home and the church on the same property. They also have provided, this ICBC program, also has provided these rain catch water systems. She's got 2 on the church and 1 on her home. So they're getting fresh water instead of the water out of the ground, which is connected a lot of times to the local rivers, which all the cows bathe in and all of that. So it's not very clean and can have disease in it. So they're getting clean rainwater regularly, and I was so blessed to be able to be out there and see it in person in August and drink some of that water, and I didn't get sick, so hey. So this is just a really exciting time. There's still a lot of work to be done. We're still hoping to get paint for the outside and the inside. She also started a preschool in January, and she uses the church building as the preschool building for now. We're hoping one day we can get a separate building, because it's hard to decorate for a preschool and host church on Sunday, because the decorations, it doesn't really go. But they're doing their best with what they've got. And there's a picture in the upper left of the preschool. They've got 38 kids at the moment. The ICBC program also provided uniforms for all the kiddos. They provide all the food for them every month. They also provide monthly rice packets to send home with to the families. But they teach English, so this is an English school. It's Liberty Christian Academy. You can see they're pointing up to numbers on the wall. So they're actually teaching the English and the numbers, and those kids are way cute. I have so many more pictures. I wish I could have shared them all with you guys today. And then on the bottom right corner, there are more kids. We went out into community as an outreach to do an open air service, I would call it, open air church service, where we were able to reach people who don't attend church there and then be able to give them clothing at the end. So there were a lot of donations that came in here from stateside that I was able to take with me, which was like 3 luggages full, you guys. Like I had only my little school backpack of my personal stuff, so the donations were amazing. But this is a picture of the kids enjoying some of those clothing items. I love the little picture of the girl in the corner holding that big, huge pile of clothing with that huge grin on her face. And then the woman in the middle of this picture is Pendu Lile, who I keep talking about, and she really is the real she power out there. Because I come home, I'm not out there day to day doing the grind. She's kept all of these things going. She was a part of all of the events I showed you in the beginning, and she continues to be part of the she power, the church, the preschool, just everything. I don't know actually how she does all of that, but that is the woman responsible really for all of this. And you can find us on Facebook. Her church is here at LIC Eswatini, or you can find the She Power at She Power Eswatini. And that's it. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this adventure.